Hey everybody, welcome back to Adam Makes Beer. And today we're going to be breaking down the recipe for Arrowhead and also getting into the tasting. So, super pleased with how this beer turned out. I think we achieved kind of a big, bright, tropical aromatic out of the use of the whirlpool hops and then later the actual fruit and everything like that. We're going to break down all of that as we get into the recipe. But first we'll do a little bit of the tasting up front. You can see it comes out, nice and hazy as people want these beers to be. And I do get a nice bright play between the pink guava, the pineapple, and then just some, I don't know, it does have like a nice fruit juicy, even kind of tangerine thing underneath it. Really pleased with where this beer is at. This beer is 8.1%. You can pull a little bit of alcohol off there because again, it is an 8% beer. But I think it's pretty darn approachable for a lot of beers in this style range. Sometimes thinking get a little too sweet. It's not crazy dry. Despite the volume of dextrose we used in there. Remember, there is a hefty amount of lactose as well. But yeah, it makes this kind of nice, big, tropical fruit bomb. All right, anyhow, let's dive into this recipe a little bit. Arrowhead is 65.8% two-row. You could use pills. I'm using domestic. I'm not looking to throw a ton of flavor. I'm really just looking for a little baseline malt sugar scenario here. I'm not looking for a ton of character. Then I have 8.5% flaked oats for this, and then it's a whole bunch of sugar. I have 12.8% each of dextrose and lactose. And you can say, well, if you're going to be using dextrose, why are you using lactose as well? Dextrose dries it out, and then you're bumping it back up again with the lactose. The reason I'm doing that is I feel as if I had this beer be 100%, if I had 100% of the sugar from this grist bill or from this recipe coming from malt sugar, the beer would be too big and sweet. But I do want to be able to control the volume of sweetness that I build back and a particular character that I feel as if I can get from lactose. It's a particular type of slight sweetness and also maybe like a little creaminess, but definitely a mouthfeel thing. This beer I mashed at 168 degrees, gave that a nice rest, got full conversion on that starch into sugar. And we did end up hitting 1078 with this beer as a starting gravity, and that did ferment down to 1016. I fermented that with juice from Imperial, as always, and worked super well. I did pitch this a little bit cooler. I pitched it at 68 degrees and then set the temperature gauge at 68 and let it come up to 68 naturally. And then toward the back half of fermentation, I did take that temp controller and switch it up to 71 to allow it to free rise up to 71 to help this bigger beer fill out a little bit. Not fill out, but finish out a little bit. After, just before we were done fully fermenting out the malt sugars, I did push about 250 pounds each of pineapple and pink guava. This is for a 15-barrel batch, so you can do a little bit of math on that, scale that down. I did fully ferment that fruit out. Once the fruit was fully fermented out, I sealed the tank, crashed the temperature down, blew the yeast and the majority of the fruit off, and then I dry hopped this with 44 pounds of Lotus and 22 pounds of Strata. I kept those at 58 degrees for really only about 24 hours, and I did rouse the hops a few times with CO2 from the bottom of the tank to make sure that I was getting as much extraction as I could out of those dry hops. After 24 hours, I crashed that beer down to 33, and after a few days cold, I moved it into the bright tank. On the way to the bright tank, I did use 10 ounces each of a TTB-approved natural extract from Apex Flavors, 10 ounces of pineapple and 10 ounces of pink guava. Every time I use real fruit, I like to come over the top with a TTB approved natural extract because I feel like it really helps to lift those notes on that beer. And yeah, I think it's a great way to amplify. Gosh, I really think that's just about it as far as recipe. But again, coming back to the beer, you do get that nice mix of real fruit that you get from the actual fruit in there, and then almost this kind of tangerine / tropical kind of bump that you get from the dry hop in this beer. I don't use I don't use any kettle hops, whirlpool hops when I do this beer, because with all that real fruit that I'm using, it does pull the pH down, and I don't want to be clashing my bitterness with a lower pH on this beer. So this is one of the reasons that I pull the hops out of the kettle on this, and the first time you really see hops are with the pretty generous dry hop. Anyhow, I hope you enjoyed this series, following along with us on the brew day and the tasting. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. As always, like, share, subscribe, share it with beer-loving, brewing-loving people. I appreciate it. Hope you have a good one. Cheers.